everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
Today we're taking a look at Biohack, which is from a company who has made some really interesting and diverse games. Mike, this is a company that you really like their stuff.
Yeah, Uchibakoya is still a small publisher out of Japan, but seems to be getting bigger and bigger. They're getting, localizations and things along those lines. And this is the first-time designer, I believe, with this company at least. I'm not familiar with the designer at all.
And so in Biohack, there's a long backstory, which is translated, so I'm missing a lot of it. But there's an evil scientist or a bad scientist who's messing with people's DNA and animal DNA and creating, dark creations. And he passed away. But now his daughter showed up and has hired his disgraced students who worked for him in the past, they were fired from their jobs and they have nothing left. But they're the only people who know how to manipulate this equipment. That's you. You get to mess with human DNA and animal DNA and create unthinkable animals.
So, I want to make animorphs.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, so it's a worker placement style game. Let me show you a little bit about how it plays. In this game, players are going to be scoring points, and it's mostly going to be about building different creatures. You'll start the game with a couple of these creatures in your hand. You're going to be building more of them. The creatures are going to cost a certain number of genes to build, and creatures will give you future benefits. I mean, look at this one. It's a moose and a winged creature. Anyhow, so that's what you're attempting to do. But let's talk about how it's done. At the beginning of each of the 4 rounds of the game, players are going to take 5 cards that match these 5 locations on the board: the mountain, the river, the basement, the bank, and the hospital. Players are then going to pick 3 of those cards, and they're going to put their workers on the 3 spots that they put out there. And other players are going to be doing this simultaneously. So there's going to be a certain number of workers at a spot. So each of the players will be putting out 3. And you're going to look at that spot, because then in turn order, and you'll keep track of turn order here, you will be able to take one of your workers off a spot, and you will get an action at that spot based on the number of workers that are there. So if a spot has 3 workers, and I pull mine off, like for example, this gives me 2 of the purple gene, it gives me a potion, and that's pretty good. That's with two other workers there besides myself. But if I'm the last person to take it off, I get 1 purple gene or the potion. And if you're playing a 4-player game, you can get a whole lot if there's 4 people there and you pull yours off first. Once you pull them off, you're going to place them on your board. And so you have a spot on your board to place these on. And then in the future, you can pull off another one of your workers, or you can send a worker out to one of these worker placement spots. There are 4 that are going to change every round. Like I can go to the zoo and get a whole bunch of DNA, or I can go to the aquarium and just get a bunch of fish DNA. But I can also go to the alley here, and there's a spot for 1 person to go to each of these. What these will let you do is they'll let you put a time token over here when you go to these spots, which will pick your turn order for the next round, but also give you a bonus at the beginning of the round if you're not going first. So you can do that or some other bonus for going to these spots. Once both of these spots are full of workers, then everyone else just will have to go to the top of that. The alley lets you switch money for DNAs, or even get this forbidden DNA or spend it to get a bunch of stuff. The DNA Incorporated lets you claim these at the top, which are goals. Like this one here says, I have 4 creatures that need fish DNA, and if that's the case, I'll put one of my reward tokens on it to get points at the end. You can upgrade your scientist that you start with, and the biofarm is where you go to play, to spend DNA and put creatures in front of you. Each player has their own board, and this is where you are going to be placing the different creatures. Each creature has a different type, and so you have room for 2 of the rare ones, 3 of these, and 4 of these. When you cover up spots, you'll get rewards, and when you completely fill in a row, you'll also get bonus points at the end of the game, depending on who's the first one to do it. Each player is going to start with a scientist that, like for example, this one at the beginning of every turn gives me 1 in the lizard genes or the green genes, and you has 2 abilities that can be unlocked, which gives me once per round a discount of 2 of those on a monster, and then another ability that can be unlocked, which basically says at the end of this round, at the end of the game, I get 4 points for every creature who needs green. So this one would give me a bonus of 4 points. Creatures themselves are going to be worth points. The ones in the bottom row will give you points based on everything else that you have out there, while the ones in the top row are just going to be worth points. Like the moose here, who goes in this row, is worth 6 points. Like I said, they also give special abilities. This guy in the top row says when I go to the river spot on the board, I get a reroll of a die for free. When someone has 7 creatures, that triggers the end of the game, or when there's 4 rounds of creatures. But over here, you're keeping track of your DNA and spending it, and this is where you'll keep your money. So real quick, the different spots that you can go to. You can go to the bank to get money and points. You go to the basement to draw cards. The cards for the different characters will be stacked underneath here in different rows, and they have a cost to take them into your hand. But you can get discounts depending on how many people are here. This one gives you potions and gives you primate genes. And then the rest of the genes are up here in the mountain and the river. Now, when you go to the mountain or river, you always have to roll the danger die for going there. It mentions that after every time. You roll the danger die. Sometimes you're lucky and it gives you some genes. Sometimes you're really lucky and it gives you a forbidden gene. And sometimes you're unlucky and it will wound the person you send out. That person you won't be able to use, and in fact, you'll lose a bunch of points at the end of the round. However, each player has potions, and you can get potions in various spots, and you simply will spend one of your potions, drink a potion, and you can heal somebody. So you always want to keep a potion in reserve. So on this side, like I said, you're pulling people off and getting stuff, and then over here, you're spending it or exchanging it to go to the bio farm. These spots down here, the downtown, these are going to change from round to round. So maybe if I go to a friend's house and spend less to upgrade my scientist, or I go to the sewer where I'm going to get reptiles and mammals down there, or the protected forest. I don't know what I'm doing in there, getting DNA. So you're going to play, like I said, 4 rounds or until someone gets 7 creatures, and then you'll add points for this, which is getting whole rows of animals. For your points over here, the points on the animals themselves, like this minotaur here, is simply worth 9 points. Points for your scientist and the benefits they give you, and whoever has the most points is the winner. All right, so let's talk about theme and components. This company is just on fire when it comes to how their stuff looks for the most part.
I agree. I have the minorest of little complaints, like, oh, my screen printed meeples look a little confusing on the back sometimes, or like one of the meeples is in a chair and the others are standing up, so it kind of looks odd, but not like a wheelchair. It's just kind of like a lazy boy chair. There's like I have these little complaints, like, oh, some parts of it don't look extremely excellent. That's kind of, you know what I mean? That's like the extent of my complaints. I think this looks great.
Yeah, and just as a little background, this publisher, Uchibakoya, actually started by making custom meeples. So before they even started producing games, they were known to create these high-quality screen-printed meeples. So it makes sense that those have looked good across the board for their games, and I think that continues here. I don't think I have quite the same issue with Chris about the meeples. I mean, the guy's in a chair, okay, that's fine. But I do have a couple of component issues. I don't know if now, maybe I'll just go ahead and bring them up now so that if you have similar ones, you can. You've got a track that keeps keeps track of your resources, and there are a lot of resources. I can't remember, maybe 7 or so, and they are tracked by these very large, tall kind of cylinders almost. And it gets a little bit kind of fiddly to mess with those, and sometimes they'll slide a little bit. It's not dual layer or anything like that. So that is one little component issue I have with it. But the look of the game, I think, is spectacular. I particularly like the depiction of the kind of animal-human hybrids. I think it looks great. It has kind of this almost, I don't know, cyberpunky look to it, so I like that a lot. The theme is one that may not appeal to everybody, but I particularly like it because it's very over the top. I don't think that they're going for like a reality type of thing. So that's my opinion on that.
Evil science!
I agree with those long posts. That is a problem. I wish that was easier to maneuver. I love the artwork in this game. I just wish they had leaned more into the weirdness of it. They have so many fantasy creatures, from a sphinx to, a centaur to a dragon, and that just feels, that pulls me out of the theme just a little bit. Like when there's a winged moose, I'm like, that's a crazy creation. A flying shrimp. That's cool, and I wish they had done more of that.
I agree. The elephant, whale, narwhal thing. I mean, it's funny, though, because you look at these mythological creatures that are in the game, like the chimera and the sphinx and stuff, and at first I think, why are there, like, mythological things? Oh, yeah, no, we're making them. They still are weird scientific mashups.
Sure.
So that part doesn't bother me nearly as much as it kind of bugged a lot of the players at the table. But it's still kind of a minor point. You're still making a weird hybrid animal.
Mike has a point, though, about the theme. When I was playing, I played this last night, and with some people, and they were going to the hospital and grabbing some primate genes, and they were talking about exactly how they got them. And I was like, we're starting to head into a little bit dark territory. Oh, that's right, we're evil scientists. So you got to keep that in mind.
You have to have some levity with it. I definitely took some human DNA samples from the prison. Whatever that means, I have my own little story that I made up. Yours might be different.
But the mechanisms of the game. So this is a worker placement and pooling game, which is really curious. I mean, turn order in this game is such a huge deal. Bigger than almost any game I can think of in a long time. Because going first is immense. You pull the worker off, and then your second action, you pull the worker off probably the spot where there's the most people. Maybe, right? And then your second action, do I want to quick take one of those good spots, or do I want to pull another worker off? And I think that provides really great tension.
Yeah, I think that this is, so often we'll say, oh, it's a unique take on the worker placement mechanism, and those are becoming harder and harder to find. But I do think this one is, because it's not just that hook that we've seen before in games like Raiders of the North Sea, where place a worker, pull a worker, because those are usually done at the same time. And that's not the case here. Timing is so important, and that's why I agree with Tom that the turn order mechanism is immensely important. Because you might want to pull all your workers first before you place them, although that's probably not your best move. Only if you can get more stuff if there's more people at your location. So we've even seen that work before. But it's the combination of all of these things, the exclusive spots that you can go, that everyone has access to the main action, but you have access to a bonus, a better version of that action. So you're kind of worried about that. You've got these downtown tile locations that are going to change every round, and those are usually very highly sought after. So it's the idea of, you have to pull first. You have no option there. You have to pull one of your workers first. But then if you want, you can pull another worker on your next turn, or you can take that worker and place it over in the experiments area. So the timing of everything is huge. What different people are trying to go for is huge. This is not a multiplayer solitaire game, in my opinion. You really have to worry about what other players are doing.
And also, cards aren't taken when they're cards aren't replaced when they're taken till the end of the round. So that's another thing. My only concern about this, and maybe I've looked in the rulebook and maybe I'm missing something, but if you're first to pull somebody off, and then your second movement, you put somebody on, you can then decide to go first again next round. And I feel like that's a little too strong, because you could essentially go first the whole game, and that's a big deal. I would almost make a house rule, and again, I looked the rules, maybe it's in there somewhere, like the first person to pick a turn order can't pick first again. Because I've seen it now. And first is so good because pulling off gives you that much more stuff.
Yeah, this game balances a few things, I think, really well. And there might be something to that, right? Because grabbing the first player action is still associated with a strong action. It's not kind of like its own thing like we've seen in other worker placement games where you get something slight, but you get first player's compensation. You get to still do a full action.
Yeah.
But with that small concern, I do love the tension of the turn order, though, because it's been a while, I guess, since I've played a game where I had so much tension where I'm thinking to myself, I hope no one goes to that spot or removes a worker from here. If either of those is still available, then I can remove a worker from here and have a huge action, or if someone does that, I'll use this as my backup. I'll go there first. And just the amount of tension as you're watching other players take their turns, it feels refreshing. Most games are kind of trending towards a little bit looser, and this one says, no, it's tight, but it's done in such a good and fun way.
I have a couple of quick things to say about the turn order. I think that could be a concern for sure. Small mitigations to that is that this is one of those games where if you're first in turn order, you get no bonus. And every other player later in turn order does get some type of a bonus during the planning phase at the beginning of each stage. So there's that. But I also would be curious. I mean, this would be a game where I would try it. Is that person going to always win? If someone who's first just chooses to go first every round, I do wonder, is that like a guaranteed win? I'm not so sure. Obviously, I haven't been in a game where that was tried or in several games to kind of get a data set, but I'm not sure about that.
The other thing I do really enjoy about the worker placement we haven't mentioned yet is that to place them out there at the start of the round, right, and of course in the overview, you pick 3 location cards. I like that because it reminds me, it harkens back to my favorite part of the game, Tricarion, which is kind of programming your worker placement out there. And this does it kind of just a little bit quicker. And I feel like it turns the tension on its head a little bit where everyone's out there. Now, what are people going to do rather than don't take my spot? It's don't remove the worker from the spot that I want to be at a stronger level. But if you do take them off of there, I still will get something good. But man, I really need that next level up.
What did you all think of the danger die? I mean, you lose a buku amount of points. It's like 12 or 16 points if you have an injured person. So that needing to get potions, because you have to go to those spots. You have to go to danger die spots to get some genes. I mean, I guess you could skip them the whole game, but the danger die is critical because not only is it a dangerous thing, but also it's one of the best ways to get that forbidden genes that are so useful and needed for like any high point monster.
Yeah, I mean those hybrid kind of, I think that's what it's called, the hybrid gene or what I'm whatever. Yeah, it's the most powerful. It can be punishing. I mean, look, there's no question about it. It can be punishing because many of the players start with, you have 2 medicine vials, essentially, and the players later in turn order from the beginning of the game are going to have both of those medicine vials full. Basically, when somebody gets injured by rolling the danger die, well, Tom probably talked about it in the overview, but you have to kind of spend one of those. So you do want to have medicine vials. The other thing, though, that I think gets lost a little bit is that I think a lot of people are reticent to spend what is needed to re-roll that die. Because that's there. You can always spend 2 coins, or I believe it's one of the genes that you are getting from the associated place. And that can mitigate it a bit. Going to the hospital can mitigate it a bit. But yeah, it can be punishing. And 12 points is a lot, but I feel like that's there for a purpose. I don't think that was an arbitrary decision made by the designer. I feel like that must be there because otherwise there would be workarounds. There would be ways to kind of game the system. But by making it such a strong penalty, you're not able to do that.
By the way, they're called feral genes. I looked it up. I've been calling them forbidden genes for a long time. Like, hey, you're not allowed to use these.
Forbidden fruit. Yeah, I agree. The die roll feels arbitrary. And of course, it is a die roll. But you do have enough agency to make sure you have the vials of medicine before you take a risky move. So it's odd because I agree that I think that it's one of those mechanisms that will not ingratiate itself upon first plays, and especially if one person gets hosed from the win because of it. But also, it's kind of on you if you do that.
All right, what would you give the game?
Score-wise, I really like this one a lot. I'm coming in at an 8 because there's just a few little things here and there we talked about. I think for the production for the most part is great. However, there is a confusion between the rules as written versus the symbology in one of the spots where you can do exchanges. Because the rules as written say that you can exchange some types of DNA for others, but the symbology kind of shows it as like a money to DNA exchange. It really should be more of a 3-way exchange symbol. There's like little things like that that kind of, I wish that those weren't the issues, the little, knocking over the pillars, those little things. But at the end of the day, this is a fun game. It leans into its tightness, and it's a little bit of those punishing things like with the die rolls and stuff, in a way that I feel like I should be annoyed by a few of those things more than I am. I really like the worker placement system. I really like creating the cool animals, making the sets across your board. But also the game just kind of doesn't really hold your hand. It says, be good at it or get better.
Yeah, I'm also giving it an 8. I like it a lot. I forgot to mention there's the two blues in the game. I found them to be very similar in how they look on the board.
That's
the feather and the fish.
Issue.
And you can easily mistake one for the other. I get to the point now when I'm teaching it, I'm like, all right, these are very different. And lighting matters a lot there too. But I do enjoy it. Yes, there's little things on it. I'm not sure the scaling is as good. I mean, because there's those 4 spots at the bottom in a 4-player and a 3-player game, which makes a 3-player game slightly more things to do than a 4-player game. Not a huge difference, but it matters a little bit. And so, I love the theme. It's such a unique, interesting theme. It's fun. It plays very quickly. These guys are making it sound like a Lacerda heavy game. I think it's tight, but I usually dislike tight games, and I didn't feel too tight because you can always go somewhere. You can always do something. Even if I'm the last person to pull off, I get something. And like, for example, in the hospital, I'm like, I desperately need a potion. Well, guess what? Even if I'm the last guy to pull off, I can still get a potion. So that's why it doesn't bother me as much. You might not get as much as everybody else, but you'll get something.
I love how you really love this theme, and you're still calling them magical potions.
Yeah, well, they're not potions. They're medicine tokens. Whatever. Potions. All right. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I was getting ready to say Tom really wants this game to be set in Hogwarts. So I have similar production issues. The things we already mentioned, the icons are a little too close for comfort. My other kind of little thing that brings it down, I'm coming in an 8 like you guys. These are just things it's just on this side of an outstanding. And also, I worry a little bit that I wish there were more cards. I'll just get it to you that way. I wish there were more cards, especially those end game cards, because you're going to have, in a 4-player game, you're going to have a river, basically, of 4 of them, and there's not that many cards in that deck, right? Because those are really expensive, so you're not going to see a lot of them. But I just wish there was a little bit more for variety's sake, because I want to see more of these cool creatures. That's maybe a selfish ask, but that's one thing I really would have liked to have seen, and maybe we'll see. But the worker placement is really a novel way to handle it. It's nothing like a Lacerda game. I think that actually it's pretty intuitive once you understand what the general concept is, and it also does not outstay its welcome. It's definitely a full game, but this is not one that's going to drag on and on and on. There's a lot of forward momentum in the game. So a lot of really good things. Easy recommended 8, just short of an excellent.
Well, there you go, folks. That's Biohack. Check it out. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
And we're full of feral genes.
And potions.